Okay, so thank you, Kathleen, for the presentation. It is a very honor to present this work. This is a joint work with Aglaia Calamaziano from Pantheon University of Social and Political Sciences in Athens and Adele Marshall from Queen's University of Belfast. So my presentation will follow the points on motivation, a review of literature, and the proposed statistical approaches with a particular focus on gender parity index. And then I will describe the data set and the results. So at the end, I will finish my presentation with conclusion and discussion. So we start with the motivation and statistical approach. So this work examines gender differences according to the two new indicators in higher education studies. And one indicator represents the length of studies beyond the minimum requirement, and the other represents a harmonized graduation mark. So we explore these indicators in a statistical framework that consists of survival analysis, Kaplan-Meier, the accelerate failure time models, survival trees, multivariate regression trees, and a modified gender parity index. And this combination of statistical methods allows both to analyze the data involving censoring and to incorporate other explanatory variables in the analysis. These approaches were applied to data taken from a Greek and an Italian university and provide evidence that the survival analysis is a useful tool for exploring gender gaps in higher education, while the accelerate failure time model permits the investigation on how other variables can influence the gaps. The data mining techniques of survival tree and multivariate regression tree allows for the importance of such influencing variable to be measured and illustrate these in a simple to view tree structure. So the multivariate regression tree approach allows us to consider more than one continuous outcome variable, so we were able to consider the two proposed indicators simultaneously. So interesting insight from this analysis are that gender has an important role and women outperform regarding these new indicators by taking less length of studies, less graduation time with higher performance, controlling also for other student characteristics. So the modified gender parity index reached the result in all stages. Okay, we start with motivation. So in general, gender is considered to have a fundamental influence on research in higher education. In fact, according to Jacobs, the discussion about gender gap often treats all aspects of education as working to the disadvantage of women. Primarily inequalities to the treatment of women were sharp and clear regarding the key and essential matter of access to higher education and consequently to degree awards. However, the above reality has changed. In fact, men's share of total access to higher education has fallen behind that women, where nowadays women outnumber men in higher education in general in most countries. In fact, for instance, OECD countries show that on average women accounted for 46% of enrollments to higher education in 1985, then 51% in 1995, and 53% in 2000, and 55% in 2005. And it is projected to rise to 59% in 2025 if past trends continues. So this higher propensity of women in higher education seems to motivate a higher attainment of degrees. And in fact, the trends are the same, at least for the OECD member countries, where it is reported that the gap in degree awards is widening to the benefit of women. On average, 54% of degrees were awarded to women in 1998, 57% in 2005, and is expected to reach 63% at 2025. Okay, so of course, given this context where women have outperformed men in terms of enrollment and graduation, indicators in higher education, this work wishes to conduct a more in-depth study to explore the gender gap in an intermediate stage by investigating differences in academic achievement. There has been a change in gender gap in higher education from position of male dominance to female dominance. During such time of historical reversal, changes were occurring for female students with regard to inter-university student life and accomplishment like graduation, persistence, attrition, and performance in general. Several authors comment on the gender gap reverse in terms of access enrollment to higher education and graduation. In particular, this phenomenon is attributed to changes made in higher education since the second half of the 20th century, where there was a rapid expansion due to social, economic, political changes worldwide. In general, the proposed explanations are based on demographic, sociological, economic, and educational factors. For example, from a demographic point of view, the changes in behavior and in policies of legalized contraception help to explain the rise in female participation in higher education in the last century. Moreover, the downsizing of family has produced a greater participation in higher education. For the sociological factor, we consider the reduction in discrimination in labor market. The abolition of the legal or tacit discrimination and the introduction of the incentive to hire women gives women increased access to higher education to compete for equal opportunity in employment. So when we considering economic factor, we have to say that the human capital theory suggests that individuals make their decision to study or not in terms of economic return expected from their studies. From this point of view, higher incentives for one gender could lead to higher rates of participation in higher education. If we consider the wages, for example, the literature does not provide a convincing explanation for the growth inequality in favor of female students. But if we consider, on the contrary, in the United States, the return on degrees, we see that this return on degrees has increased more strongly for women than men over the past few decades, and therefore explaining the difference in the growth in participation in higher education. And the last one, it's the educational factors that show that the improvement in female academic access and progress depends on the increasing improvement of the preparation received in secondary school. In fact, if we consider the program of International Student Assessment, PISA, in 2008, it showed that compared to boys, girls aged 15 years old score much higher in reading, that is more 30 points on average respect boys, obtaining comparable result in science. It's -2 points on average, and lower in mathematics is -5 points on average. So in general, this consideration and the attitude of female students to work harder and more consistently for academic performance and to better manage time helps to explain women's academic success in grade average and beliefs about her ability. There is some evidence to suggest that the reverse tendency does not always hold across all fields of study or when poverty and other socioeconomic factors are considered. Okay. So in this work, we analyze the graduation in higher education involving gender. And the focus of this current research aims to measure the gender gap with respect to student length of study and final grade at graduation, that is an academic performance index. So the definition of length of study is usually the difference between the initial enrollment in a college to the time a degree is awarded. And when graduation is not enforced to take place in a prescribed time, as for example in Italy and in Greece, the length of study is more general term that can be used to capture this previous case, and so also cases delayed graduation. And graduation marks present a more informative measure than graduation rates, as it reflects a more refined measurement of the performance of the students, rather than a report on whether they have been successful in graduating or not. There is less research available regarding gender gap on this issue on the part of the final grade at graduation, and some studies find that although women students perform better on average than their male counterparts, they are significantly less likely to obtain the higher grades, with no explanation as to why. Other studies also have strong evidence for lower variation in grades among girls than boys, and of higher average grades for girls in the mathematics or science, the STEM faculties. So the focus of we do so by examining the following hypotheses using data from the social departments in the two universities in Greece and Italy. The first is female students tend to graduate early or have a lower length of studies than male, as told by several authors, and this result also holds controlling for age at enrollment, nationality, department, and country. The second hypothesis is about female students perform better and present same variation in the final grade of graduation. And of course, this also holds controlling for department. The last one is about male students who complete their studies in a comparable time to females, obtain a lower final grade than female counterparts, and this holds controlling for age at enrollment, nationality, and department. Okay, so to confirm this hypothesis, some statistical methods have been used and applied to all the available data. And these methods include, the first is the survival analysis, and in particular Kaplan-Meier estimator for capturing the probability of a student to have a length of study greater than time t. The second, in part of survival analysis, is the accelerate failure time models for capturing the effect of other variables on the length of studies and performance at the university. And then we have the regression trees, in particular the survival trees and multivariate regression tree, to highlight student characteristics that jointly influence length of study and performance. And the last one, throughout the analysis, we used the international recognized gender parity index, and modify this measure to account for the two proposed higher education indicator. So, given by survival analysis, some regression trees are well known. I will put my attention and will explain about gender parity index. So, the gender parity index is a social economic index designed to measure the relative access to education of male and female. In general, this index is commonly used by international organizations such as UNESCO, but it's poorly mentioned by the literature accounting for gender differences. And it is defined as a ratio between the female value of an indicator at time t, and the denominator is given by the male value of the new indicator, the same indicator at the time t. Okay, and the gender parity index value equal to 1 indicates parity between females and males, and in general, a value less than indicates a disparity in favor of males, and a value greater than 1 indicates a disparity in favor of female. So the interpretation should be the other way around for indicators were normally used. The approach is to 0% is the ideal. For example, the rate of repetition, dropout, illiteracy rate, and etc. So I present briefly the data, and but I want to give an introduction about the graduation process for undergraduate courses in Greek and Italian university. For both undergraduate systems, students who first enroll in a department or faculty can only graduate if two conditions are satisfied. There is a certain number of course units that must be successfully completed by students for them to get a degree. And there is a minimum duration time, which we call threshold of graduation, in which this unit can be completed. But graduation is not possible before this minimum time, but there is no a maximum time. So you can give your graduation after maybe 20 years in Italy if you pay taxes, or in Greece without no problem. So in Greece system, the minimum duration of majority of course, undergraduate course, is equal to 46 months. And the situation of the Italian university is very similar. The difference is given by the threshold for graduation, which is 34 months. So students' data are provided by Pantheon University in Greece and University of Milano Bicocca in Italy. For Pantheon University, the students were 6,219, and the focus is on 4 cohorts of students who enrolled at the university for the first time from September 2000 to September 2003. And the students who transferred to other university or who dropped out are excluded from this analysis. Each student was observed from the time of their first enrollment in the university and up to 48 months after the corresponding threshold of graduation. This is the period of observation. For each case, the dates of first enrollment and graduation where there is any are recorded. Other student features included in the analysis were chosen based on theoretical consideration, previous research on student graduation, and their availability in the original data set. So individual background variables that are treated in this analysis as explanatory include cohort year, gender, age, nationality, country, and department. So for Milano Bicocca University, we had the same variables, but the students were 4,325, and the other information are similar, and the only thing is the minimum duration of studies, 34 months. Okay. For the purpose of our work, we introduced 2 new variables treated in the analysis and independent variables. So the first is the time to graduation after threshold, and to make a comparable the results between the 2 countries, we propose this new variable that is time to graduation after threshold, calculated by subtracting the appropriate date of entry from data of graduation. So it's given by this, and we have that is the threshold that is 46 months for the Greek student and 34 months for Italian students. Okay. So we can see that the variable being investigated in the survival analysis is this TGAT, And the event variable to give the censorship is an indicator variable for censorship, taking the value of 1 if graduation takes place during the observation period that is 48 months, or 0 otherwise. So the other variable that we have is the graduation mark. It's recorded differently in the two countries. In Greece, the intervals of the value is between 5 and 10, while in Italy is 18 and 110 cum laude, that will be treated as 113. For the purpose of investigation, the marks obviously are harmonized using this formulation. And X is, of course, graduation mark, and we have the minimum, min is the minimum value of the graduation time, and for country, and the max is the maximum value for the country. So here we have the description of the sample by gender. So this table reports the composition of the sample with respect to social demographic information of students by gender. The study data consists of 10,544 students that remain students after the threshold of graduation. That is the beginning of the period of observation. So 69% of students are women, and the percentage of Greek and Italian students in the data set are 59% and 41% respectively. So the majority of respondents were local students, 87%, and 44% of those observed were enrolled in economics department, 34% in sociology, and 22% in psychology. Here we can see that 72% of the students in the sample were considered regular students. That means that they are age less than or equal to 19 years old upon first enrollment, with the remaining 28 of students are not regular. So graduated students make up 79% of the data set, and they present on average of TG80 and the graduation mark of 15 months and 0.46 respectively. So you can see there that, of course, we have that 17% of the students are considered a censor. So they didn't give graduation after 48 months after the threshold. So it's very huge time. So it's clear that during the observation period, the proportion of graduated women that are 82% is greater than men, that is 72%, and in fact the difference is statistically significant. Also analyzing the length of study, we can see that female graduated students spend on average 15 months beyond the threshold time for graduation to get their degree, compared to 18 months for males, with the resulting difference being statistically significant. These results are also supportive of our first hypothesis, where women tend to graduate earlier than men and in line with outcomes of previous literature. So examining the harmonized marks at the graduation, the GM here, women are found to have an average of 0.48 in comparison to 0.41 for men, and again this difference is significant, and in comparison women have the same variation in the graduation mark. We test this, and this confirms our second hypothesis. Okay, so we have the results. I hope to be okay, yes. So here these figures provide the survival function on the time to graduation after the threshold, estimated using Kaplan-Meier approach for the full data set and for men and women respectively here. So when considering the full data set, it can be seen that the median of TGAT and the upper quartile is approximately 16 and 39 months respectively, suggesting that a quarter of the students have not graduated almost 3 years after the threshold. When considering the women and men, it can be seen that the graduation rate in general is lower for men for each time compared to women. So this difference is proven significant according to the log-rank test and suggesting different behavior between women and men respect to TGAT. Okay, so here we can see this is supported by the information given in this table concerning graduation time. So the risk or the probability of a student not graduating 1, 2, or 3 years after the threshold for graduation, and the estimated risk or probability of a student not yet graduating after 4 years. And the median of TGAT for women is 14 and compared to 24 for men. So while the previous mentioned probability of not graduating are continually lower for women in comparison to men. So all of these results indicate a better performance of women regarding TGAT. And here it's again a verification of our hypothesis, the first hypothesis. So here we give the definition of the gender parity index, in which we use the estimation of Kaplan-Meier survival function as the indicator. So we have in the numerator the Kaplan-Meier survival function for female for each time t, and in denominator we have the Kaplan-Meier survival function for men. Okay, so recall that in this case, if the gender parity index is less than 1, there is a disparity, in this case in favor of female. In fact, it means that at time t, the proportion of survived female students that are still enrolled at the university is lower than the same proportion of male students. And here we have if the GPA is greater than 1, we have a disparity in favor of male, and when is equal to 1, we have a parity for female and male. Okay, so here we can see that in summary we have the figure in which we have the gender parity index in the time during the observation period. So in summary, we can see that the gender parity index has a value lower than 1 for all t time, highlighting a disparity in favor of women. Moreover, it can be seen that the shape of this GPA curve is constantly decreasing in the first 20 months of the observation period, and it decreases slowly and finally stabilizes at 0.6 after 30 months. This means that the proportion of graduating women is always greater than the men. So, however, it comes out that during the first 30 months of the observation period, the difference in this proportion is getting greater month by month in favor of women and then remain constant. One explanation for this graduation behavior could be that women are more strongly committed to fulfill their studies and get their degree, particularly at the beginning of the period of observation. And then we made the same, the gender parity index for country and the department. So in particular, when considering country, GPA figures show that for the first 24 months, there is the same trend in disparity in favor of women for both Italian and Greek students. However, beyond this point, the disparity for the two countries widens. And the result for GPA, considering the part of the department, we can see that GPA show that there is a disparity in favor of women in all departments, but is more pronounced for women in sociology and psychology. And we know that, as mentioned by several authors, women are stronger in traditional female-dominated departments as psychology and sociology. Then, in this case also, but not so marked, in male-dominated such as business and economics. If we consider the other covariates, when we consider age and enrollment and nationality, GPA showed that the regular students have greater disparity for women in comparison to non-regular students, and the native have a greater disparity for women in comparison to international, that means not native students. So in conclusion, all our results concerning the gender parity index also confirm the first hypothesis about the TGAT for women. So then we further have other investigation, and we try to put in our model in survival analysis a Weibull accelerate failure time that we fit before several accelerate failure time regression model, and this model was appeared to be the more appropriate, having the score, for example, AC and BIC, the lowest in all metrics. So this table for the total data set shows that the estimate of the Weibull regression coefficient corresponding to the explanatory variable of TGAT, where it appears that gender, age, and nationality, country, and department have significant impact. But in particular, TGAT for men is expected to be about 46 more than women, keeping all the other variable constant. So in this table, we explore two separate Weibull accelerated failure time models for men and women for the purpose of investigating this gender gap and compare the effect of the covariates between men and women separately and for the full data set. So at the first glance, we can observe that the coefficients of female and male models have similar signs to those to complete data and set, meaning that these covariates contribute in the same way to TGAT. But if we want to focus on the this difference in the model corresponding to men and women, we found that the department, age, and country show significant differences in the magnitude of the corresponding coefficients. For the model of women, it appears that the covariates with the most impact on TGAT in order are age, department, and country. And for the male students, we have the same covariates significant, but in a different order, this country, age, department, and nationality. So here, to further clarify the above results, we fit a survival tree to data to identify groups of students who behave similar with respect to the time graduation after the threshold, taking into account the covariates. So you can see these. The gender, of course, show the greatest level of importance with 41% of importance to find this survival tree, followed by department, age, nationality, and country. And we have 10 terminal nodes of this tree that identify 10 homogeneous groups. The first group is associated with a TGAT and median equal to 40 months, consisting of 264 male international students in economic, of which 54% have graduated. In terms of median of TGAT, this group have the lowest performance, which may underline a particular difficulty for international students when they study abroad. The second group consists is equal to the first group, but it's the difference is given by the gender. So when we can compare, as in this case, the second group, we have female international students in economic with a median that is 32 months, and of which 62%, more or less 61% have graduated. This group performs better than the first in terms of TGAT and in terms of graduation rate, and different only by gender, as I told before. So we can skip the other and go in the last one. And the last two groups are corresponding to the best groups. And they are Greek, and the ninth it's women, sociology, students in sociology and psychology that are students in Greece. And then the last one, the best, is the women in sociology and psychology, correctly enrolled in Italy. So in summary, what is the meaning of this work is, in summary, the result of the decision tree showed that the women perform better than their men, and they is reinforced with the development of 10 groups of students' behavior, where only 3 of the groups correspond to men who tend to be less influenced by other characteristics. All of these verify our first hypothesis about the length of study that is shorter for women respect to men. So the second, maybe I'm on late. So it's about the gender effect on the graduation mark. So what we say that in general, the main results show that the greater the average in graduation mark, the less DTAGT, we put the value of a graduation mark respect to TGAT, and meaning that students who graduate faster, closer to the threshold of graduation, get better graduation mark scores and exhibit more homogeneity in the graduation mark according to some the variation coefficients. So if we consider the part of the gender parity index is the ratio between the graduation mark for female at tea time, and the denominator is given by the graduation mark for male at tea time. And we can see that this GPI in this case assumes that for each class of TGAT, a value greater than 1 indicates a disparity in the graduation mark in favor of female. So here we can see the gender parity index applied to the total sample and by the covariates, and the table show that this index on the graduation mark measure in interval of TGAT, and it's apparent that this indicator increases as TGAT increases, and that holds in almost all cases taking into account the covariates. Okay, so here it's some part of the explanation of this, and we can skip and go just finish about gender effect jointly on TGAT and GM and the part of graduation mark. So going in deep for our analysis, we want to apply the multivariate regression tree approach to detect homogeneous group with respect to the TGAT, so the time graduation after the threshold and the graduation marks together, and then test our hypothesis, the third hypothesis about the the length of studies for male and the marked graduation. So the idea is that some groups of students who are more committed than the other to their study and development at the university have a behavior that are reflected on the time to graduation and graduation mark at the same time. So not that why we want to do this kind of analysis is because TGAT and the graduation mark together are important criteria for employers, and this fact makes them also important indicator for evaluating university performance. So it is why we analyze together this. So here you can find the result of multivariate regression tree, and we can see here that we have 8 groups. In this case, the first 2 groups are the best groups, and the first groups in particular is associated with the lowest time to graduation and the highest graduation mark, and consists of 3,004 regular female students in sociology and psychology who spend on average 12 months until graduation, after the threshold, of course, and have an average graduation mark that is about 0.5. These students define the highest performing groups, the best, and the second group consists of 505 regular male students in sociology and psychology who have a time to graduation after the threshold of 17 months and a graduation mark of 0.44. So what we can see, we can also speak about the other, but in general, when it's possible to make comparison directly between 2 groups composed with the same categories except for gender, so as for example the first 2 groups, the results show women are more effective in terms of TGAT and GM in the graduation mark. Hence, the multivariate regression tree groups provide evidence to support our third hypothesis that male students who complete their studies in a similar time to female students have a lower graduation mark than their female counterparts, and add further evidence to support the other 2 hypotheses that we gave before. So sorry again for my because I'm on late. So the investigation concerned the more refined variables of the length of studies and students' final graduation mark, which are considered 2 very strong important indicators for employers and in evaluating university today. And the work was motivated by examining the data set concerning the progress of students enrolled in social science-oriented departments in an Italian and Greek university. Both universities have a common feature where students have a minimum time required to study, but not upper limit by which the studies should be completed. However, our proposed methodology could be useful to investigate similar indicators in any level of education. So here we give our confirmed previous research that there is a significant difference in male and female students, with women graduating on average earlier than men. And of course, if we consider, for example, the part of the graduation mark, we use also, and we see that respect to men, women so have greater marks. But of course, our work have few limitations, and as regard the data set. The first limitation is that a number of variables of interest were not present in the data set. So, for example, variables regarding the pre-university characteristics of students, as for example, the marks at the high school, or variables of the student on the financial aid, health issues, family needs, jobs, and other life events during the university. And the last one is that our considerations are related to social sciences-oriented departments. And yes, of course, business and economics is an outlier. It's an outlier social science department. And of course, there are alternative studies that demonstrate that a gender gap, in this case in favor of male students in the faculty as mathematics, science, so the STEM faculties remain a persistent issue despite increased efforts to understand it. Okay, sorry, I'm very late. So thank you for your attention. Thank you to Leah and thank you to Adele for this work that we made. Here are some reference. If you want to read the paper will be online, I think, in some days because we have the DOI. And so thank you very much for everything.